right, so have you ever actually stopped and thought about how much it costs to pull a roof over your head?
I guess not really.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive into the world of affordable housing in Kenya.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and trust me, it's a wild ride. We've got research articles, reports, policy analyses, the whole shebang. So buckle up.
Sounds fascinating.
It is. And to guide us on this journey, we're mainly drawing from Evans and DeLon's work, Affordable Housing Finance.
Okay.
And right off the bat, he throws some hard-hitting facts at us,
Oh.
like the massive housing deficit Kenya is facing.
Right. Yeah, I've heard about that. It's a huge issue.
Yeah, I mean, we're not just talking about a few homes here and there. This is a major gap.
Definitely a critical issue.
So I'm curious, from what you've read, what are some of the main things driving this huge demand for affordable housing?
Well, DLN points to several factors. First off, land prices, especially in cities like Nairobi, they're through the roof.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Location, right?
Exactly. It's prime real estate, but that comes with a hefty price tag.
Yeah, so trying to buy a home when the land itself costs a fortune, that's tough.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you've got the cost of construction materials, which just adds another layer of complexity.
Right, because it's one thing to afford the land, but then you've got to actually build on it, too.
Exactly. And with the cost of everything, from cement to steel on the rise, building a home is becoming increasingly expensive.
It's like a double whammy for people.
Yeah, it really is. And then on top of that, we can't forget about the financing hurdles. For a lot of Kenyans, especially those with low to moderate incomes, getting a mortgage is a huge challenge.
It's like trying to climb a mountain with one hand tied behind your back.
Exactly. High interest rates, limited loan options, and those intimidating down payments, it all adds up.
So we've got the high cost of land, rising building costs, and then the financial system itself feels designed to keep people out.
Unfortunately, it can feel that way.
And wait, there's more. DeLon also mentions the whole bureaucratic maze that developers have to navigate.
Oh, tell me about it. The regulations, permits, approvals, it's enough to make your head spin.
Right. It's like this huge obstacle course they have to get through, and that just ends up costing everyone more in the end.
Exactly. And sadly, we can't ignore the reality for many Kenyans living in informal settlements.
Right. Places like Kibera, right here in Nairobi, where conditions are really tough.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder of what happens when the need for affordable housing collides with a lack of options.
Overcrowding, poor sanitation, it's a whole other side of the housing crisis.
It really highlights the urgency of the situation.
It's definitely a complex issue, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the problem.
Yeah, it's not a simple fix, that's for sure.
But what I appreciate about Dillon's work is that he doesn't just throw his hands up and say it's too hard. He actually digs into some potential solutions.
Right. He explores a whole range of ideas, which is refreshing. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of situation.
Exactly. So where do we even begin to tackle something like this?
Well, DeLon starts by emphasizing the importance of government leadership. It's about setting a clear agenda, creating a framework for change.
Okay, so it's not just about throwing money at the problem. It's about having a real strategy.
Exactly. He points to the Affordable Housing Program, which is part of Kenya's Big Four agenda, as a good example.
Right, I've heard of that. It's a pretty ambitious plan, right?
Incredibly ambitious. They're aiming to deliver 500,000 affordable homes.
Wow, 500,000 homes. That's a lot of houses.
It's a massive undertaking, and DeLon emphasizes that it's going to require strong partnerships between the public and private sectors.
Right, because the government can't do it alone.
Exactly. It's about bringing together resources and expertise from both sides, but it's not just about building more houses, it's about building them differently too.
Oh, interesting. So tell me more about that. What do you mean building them differently?
Well, DeLon talks about some really cool, innovative approaches to construction, like using prefabricated materials, for instance.
Okay, so like those pre-built walls and roof sections you see sometimes.
Exactly. It can really speed up the construction process, and it can also help with quality control because things are being built in a more controlled environment.
Makes sense. And it's probably more cost-effective too, right?
Exactly. And then there are alternative building techniques like the stabilized soil blocks we talked about earlier.
Oh, right. Those fancy mud bricks, as I like to call them.
Chuckles. Yes. And they're not just a quirky alternative either. They can be incredibly effective, especially in certain contexts.
So it's about being open to new ideas and adapting to the specific needs of a community.
Precisely. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of the solution: financing. Because even with cheaper materials and faster construction, if people can't afford to buy these homes, it doesn't solve the problem.
Right. Financing is often the biggest hurdle for people.
Exactly. And that's where Dylan's ideas about microfinancing come in.
Okay, I've heard of microfinancing, but how would that work in the context of housing?
Well, instead of those huge, daunting loans that can feel impossible to pay back, microfinancing breaks it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
So it's like, instead of trying to save up for a massive down payment all at once, people could get smaller loans to make incremental improvements to their homes.
Exactly. Maybe they start by adding a room or improving their roof. It's about empowering people to build their way up over time.
I like that. It feels more attainable for people who might not have access to traditional financing.
Exactly. And it can also help build a sense of ownership and pride in the community. People are more invested, literally and figuratively, when they've had a hand in building their own homes and neighborhoods.
That's a really important point. It's not just about providing houses, it's about building communities.
Exactly. And that's why DeLon also highlights the importance of community-driven solutions like housing cooperatives.
Right. Those are interesting. It's like a team effort, right?
In a way, yes. It's about people pooling their resources and working together to achieve what they couldn't individually.
So like a group of families might come together to buy land or negotiate better prices on materials.
Exactly. And they can also access financing options as a group that wouldn't be available to them individually.
It's like that old saying, 2 heads are better than 1. Or in this case, maybe it's more like 20 families are better than 1 when it comes to tackling the housing crisis.
Exactly. There's power in numbers, and that's what housing cooperatives tap into.
I love that. It's like the Kenyan proverb Harambe, which emphasizes the power of community and collaboration.
Exactly. It's about coming together to achieve a common goal.
Okay, so we've got some big picture ideas here, some outside-the-box solutions. But what about the practical steps? What needs to change at the policy level to make some of these things happen? It's like we're changing the system from the ground up.
In a way, yeah. And speaking of changing the system, we've got to talk about these innovative financing models DeLon discusses. They're fascinating. Like tenant purchase schemes, for example.
Tenant purchase schemes. I'm not going to lie, I've heard the term, but I'm a little fuzzy on what it actually means.
So basically, instead of needing that huge down payment right away, you'd start by renting the property.
Okay, so kind of like rent to own.
Yeah, but here's the interesting part. A portion of your rent payments actually goes towards building equity in the home.
Wait, hold on. So instead of just throwing money away on rent, you're actually chipping away at owning the place.
Exactly.
That's brilliant. Are there any real-world examples of this actually working?
Yeah, the Ngara Heights Development Project is a good example. They're putting this model into practice.
Okay, so it's not just a theory, it's actually happening.
Exactly.
Now, I'm also curious about the role of technology in all of this.
Oh yeah, technology is huge in this space.
So give me an example. How are we using tech to make affordable housing more accessible?
Well, for one, there's spatial base mapping, which can help identify ideal locations for new projects.
Spatial base mapping. Okay, you're going to have to break that one down for me.
Basically, it's like creating a super detailed 3D map of a city using laser technology.
Wow, high tech.
Yeah. And this lets planners see everything from existing infrastructure to potential risks like flooding. It helps them make more informed decisions.
So instead of just looking at a flat map, they can actually visualize the city in 3D and factor in all sorts of variables.
Exactly.
That's incredible. What else?
Another game changer is the National Land Management Information System, or NLIMS.
Okay, I've heard that acronym thrown around before.
It's a centralized digital database for land records.
So instead of digging through mountains of paperwork, it's all online.
Exactly. Makes everything so much more efficient and transparent.
I love it. But technology aside, what about community-driven solutions?
Right, because tech is only part of the answer. We also need bottom-up approaches.
Exactly.
And that's where initiatives like the one in Nairobi's Mukuru informal settlement come in.
Mukuru.
Yep.
I've heard of it. That's a really challenging environment, right?
Yeah, it's one of the largest informal settlements in Nairobi. Access to basic services like water and sanitation is a huge issue there.
So what's being done?
They've implemented a really innovative, simplified sewage system specifically designed for the settlement's layout.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. They're really tailoring it to the specific needs of the community.
Exactly. And they've also created a special microloan product to help residents pay for toilet construction and connection fees.
So they're not just providing the infrastructure, they're also giving people the financial tools to access it.
Exactly. It's about empowering the community to be part of the solution.
I like that. It's a more holistic approach.
And speaking of empowering communities, we can't forget about the role of women in all of this.
Right. Women often face unique challenges when it comes to housing.
Absolutely. And that's why the work being done by FSD Kenya and the Kenya Women's Microfinance Bank is so important.
Tell me more about what they're doing.
They're really focused on expanding women's access to financial services and products, including housing loans.
It's great to see that kind of targeted support.
Yeah, and they're not just handing out loans either. They're also providing tools and resources like the IBULD app.
What's the IBULP?
It helps women track their loan usage and make sure their money is being used effectively to create safe and affordable homes.
So it's about financial literacy and empowerment. I like that.
It's about giving women the tools and the knowledge to build a better future for themselves and their families.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. It seems like there's a lot happening in the world of affordable housing.
Yeah, it's a dynamic field with a lot of innovative ideas and passionate people working to make a difference.
So before we wrap up, any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that this is a solvable problem. It requires collaboration, innovation, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. But we can create a future where everyone has a safe and affordable place to call home.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a topic that matters.